Week 7 college football. We got some contenders. We got some pretenders. We got a whole lot at stake at this point in the season. We also have 3 best bets coming your way and 3 big game breakdowns with 3 of the best over at wagertalk.com. As BP in the house, Brian Power, double R1L, Steve Merrill, and Jeff Michaels ready to go here and cash a few tickets in this week 7. And we're going to kick it off in the SEC. What better place than with Florida and South Carolina? Interesting line movement in this one. I'm in Florida, BP, and people still can't figure out what the hell Florida is. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they terrible? How are you looking at this game against South Carolina with them?
Yeah, Joe, it's interesting you opened the show by mentioning contenders and pretenders. As far as the SEC East goes, we obviously all know who the best team is, Georgia. We obviously all know who the worst team is, Vanderbilt. But everyone else in the middle, these 2 teams included, kind of question marks, right? And we've got conflicting trends to that point. We know Billy Napier has been great as an underdog dating back to his time as the head coach at Louisiana. He's 17-6-1 against the number, getting points with 10 outright upsets. I had a nice 5% win on him a couple weeks ago when Florida beat Tennessee, albeit at home. Tennessee, of course, always struggles in the swamp, it seems. But you look at the South Carolina side, since taking over Shane Beamer, 10-1 straight up, 9-2 ATS as a favorite. South Carolina is a short favorite here, and I'm going to lean on 2 things. One is the fact South Carolina off a bye. The last 4 times that's been the case, they're 3-1 straight up and against the number. Interestingly enough, Florida, they're entering a stretch of the schedule now where their next 3 opponents, South Carolina included, all off a bye. Florida will enjoy a bye themselves when they play Georgia. Not sure how much that'll help with the step up in class. We shall see. But rest is one edge. Home field advantage is the other for me, Joe. 6 of the last 7 meetings between these teams, the home team has won. South Carolina, they've also been a solid bet in Columbia, 12-4 straight up, 11-5 against the number. Florida's upset, like I mentioned earlier, of Tennessee. That was at home. On the road this year, Florida has played twice. They have lost double digits to Utah and to Kentucky, scored just 25 points in those 2 losses. They were just crushed up in Lexington. And this is their 3rd home game for South Carolina. They put up 37 and 47 in the first 2. I give South Carolina the edge at quarterback. I think everybody would agree. 2 weeks ago, yes, tough loss at Tennessee for the Gamecocks. But remember, earlier this season, South Carolina did hang tough with Georgia in Athens. So I like South Carolina to get it done in this Saturday afternoon showdown, Joe.
Who'd have thought Graham Mertz wasn't a good quarterback? I have no idea. Shocking on so many different levels there. We are going to move to the ACC in a big showdown coming up for a team with national championship aspirations. And before we do that, quick reminder, if you like college football content and you like these game previews as well as some best bets, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. We've got you covered here at Wager Talk TV. And double R1L, Steve Merrill, Florida State, just they're getting by. Some question marks with this team. They can certainly score. Are they going to score enough to blow by Syracuse here this weekend, do you think?
Yeah, the question marks with Florida State are definitely on the defensive side of the ball. They're explosive offensively, 42.5 points a game, 7 yards per play almost. But they're giving up 5.5 yards per play, and it's been very mediocre both against the run and the pass. So the question is, can Syracuse do anything about that? Not sure they can. On the surface, Syracuse is averaging 33 points, 6.1 yards per play. Very misleading, though. The defenses they face give up 31.5, 5.9. So they're barely above average offensively. And I'd take it a step even further down. The last 2 weeks when they finally played 2 real opponents in Clemson and North Carolina, they scored only 14 points and 7 points. And what was thought to be a good Syracuse defense gave up 31 against Clemson in what was a very bad spot, don't forget. Clemson was coming off that heartbreaking overtime loss against these Florida State Seminoles the week before. Clemson still went in there and won easy, 31-14. But last week was not a good sign for Syracuse. Not only did they lose 40-7 at Chapel Hill, but North Carolina had over 640 total yards of offense. You can only imagine what Florida State's offense can do in this game, averaging nearly 7 yards per play. And I think it is a focus spot for the Seminoles. Big game against Duke on deck next week. So they don't want to let up here. and they just beat Virginia Tech by 22 at home. And by the way, my database simulation, 10,000 games run through my database. Average margin of victory in this one, just based on the numbers this season, is Florida State by 22.5. So I do think we get some point spread value at the current line of 17.5. Would like to get down to 17. I'm not sure it's going to hit there. The Circa currently has an 18. Everyone else, if you check the Wager Talk Live odds screen, is showing 17.5. But there's probably about a 3 to 4% chance this game lands 17 as far as Florida State winning. So it is a critical number. I like Florida State. I like them even more if we get it down to minus 17 or less by Saturday.
All right, good stuff there. Florida State trying to get in that playoff conversation here. They'll have to go through Syracuse to keep it rolling. And Jeff Michaels joining us in the house here today in this week 7. You're going to head back to the SEC, and I can't remember the last time Jimbo won a game on the road in the SEC. I don't even know if it's ever happened. Really, it feels like it's forever. But I know it's been forever since Tennessee hasn't at least handled business in their own stadium, which is where they are taking on A&M. So what are you going to do in this matchup? It's a big SEC battle.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting one. Brian talked about it a little bit. Tennessee had that tough loss to Florida, obviously, but they've bounced back nicely in their last couple of games. They played UTSA and South Carolina, but they won both of those games by 20-plus points and covered the spread there. But you got a Texas A&M team that, this defense is really on a different level right now. I like looking at their numbers that they're allowing against opposing offensive averages, takes into account that strength of schedule aspect a little bit, and doesn't give a pass to those teams that are playing those walk in the park games the entire start of the year. But Texas A&M is 4th in the nation. They're holding teams 136 yards below their season average offensively. They've held every team that they've played except for Alabama to their worst game yardage-wise offensively of the season year to date. And they still held Bama to their second lowest yardage total in a game this season. But they held New Mexico, they held ULM, Auburn, and Arkansas all under 225 total yards. And I know Arkansas and Auburn are near the bottom of the list in yardage, at least in the SEC, but they're still averaging 330-plus yards per game there. So holding teams like that under 225 yards and doing it consistently, it is really a different level. And their offense, hasn't been bad. They're still putting up 90 yards above what opposing defenses are allowing. And I think everybody that's a fan of A&M was obviously holding their breath when Weigman went down. Not going to see him again. But, Max Johnson has now had 2 starts under his belt, and he got some time in those earlier games, too. He made almost 10 pass attempts in his first game. He threw double-digit pass attempts against ULM and Auburn after Weigman got hurt. So I think that defense has really been something that they've been relying on all year. I think it'll be exciting. I don't think that this Tennessee team is quite as good as some people may have anticipated off the year, and they've been almost totally reliant on their rushing attack, which, mind you, has been impressive. They've rushed for 250-plus yards per game at home. But Texas A&M has the best rush defense in the entire conference. They're allowing just 84 yards per game on the ground. So doing that in the SEC is obviously something to be proud about. And I think even without Weigman, I think this Texas A&M defense here, especially that rush defense, changes this game and gets them the win. So I'll take the points here.
Taking the points, getting it done there on the road. Should be a great matchup here. A lot of great matchups coming up in this week 7. And if you happen to have any questions about any of these games on the card, go ahead, drop them in the comment section. These guys will absolutely monitor and get back to you with the answers. Brian Power, Jeff Michaels, and Steve Merrill. And don't forget, go ahead, hit that subscribe, like button, and make sure you visit them over at wagertalk.com. Best bet time here. We'll start back up at the top. And BP, you going from the SEC, you're going to the ACC here with Pitt at home, getting points, I believe, against the undefeated Louisville. Boy, everyone loves Louisville. Do you love Louisville in this spot?
This is a spot that has me written all over it. Ironically, though, earlier in the week, Monday morning, in fact. I did a preview of this game for the Wager Talk YouTube channel, and my initial lean was to the under. I didn't know if I could get there on Pitt, but here we are 3 days later recording this, and while I still like the under, I have come around to taking Pitt and the points. It basically boils down to, Joe, covering up the names of the respective teams, covering up those resumes, and just playing the situation, okay? Louisville, you mentioned the love that's pouring in for them. They're undefeated off a huge win at home over Notre Dame. They've got a bye next week. It's their best start in a decade at 6-0. Only natural, I think, for the players to overlook a 1-4 Pitt team that has really been struggling. Coming into the year, I don't think anyone would have expected Pitt to be getting more than 7 points at home against Louisville. These teams, I think, we're seeing as pretty comparable in the ACC pecking order coming into 2023, but things have unfolded in drastically different ways. The Panthers, arguably the ACC's biggest disappointment. Phil Jurkovec was reunited with his old OC from Boston College. The hope was that could rekindle some magic. Didn't work out. You have these reports that he was practicing as a tight end during the bye week. I don't know what's going on there, but the bottom line is Narduzzi's made a change at quarterback. It's going to be Christian Veilleux, and he can't be any worse than Jurkovec was those first 5 games. I mentioned Pitt coming off the bye, so it's as good a time as any to make the change at quarterback if you're going to do it. Also, you would hope the bye would allow the Panthers to get a bit healthier. They were missing 3 starting offensive linemen in their last game, so no wonder they struggled there. End of the day, though, and I think this is the way to look at it, if we don't get inspired effort from Pitt, not good for Narduzzi at all. This was a team expected, like I said, to compete in the ACC this year. And for Louisville, a few things to keep in mind. One, it was a close game for 3.5 quarters with Notre Dame. Notre Dame really shot itself in the foot with turnovers, not only giving it away 5 times, there was a turnover on downs as well in the fourth quarter. Points off turnovers were the exact difference in that final score between Louisville and Notre Dame. And here's something else. Louisville away from home has not played all that well. It was a couple weeks ago, a Thursday night, in fact. I took the points with NC State as a 3.5-point home dog against Louisville. NC State, who's not a good team, was still starting Brennan Armstrong at the time, covered barely, but they were winning 10-0 at halftime. Cardinals also, earlier in the year, barely scraped by Indiana on a neutral site game and could have easily lost at Georgia Tech. I know Pitt failed to cover a similar number against North Carolina at home. Louisville doesn't have Drake May. I think they're a touch overrated at number 14 in the country. Give me the points, Joe, plus 7.5 with Pitt, today's best bet.
Yeah. Jeff Brom is a touchdown favorite. Good luck with that. So let's because it works so well in Purdue. Let's see. Merrill, I love this game you got coming up because I think it's fair to say that if these two teams are as good as everyone thinks they are, then covering this number shouldn't be a problem. Question is, which team is which here, and where's the hype real and where is it not? We'll talk about that here with Air Force and Wyoming coming up, but you got your top 25 video scheduled, and you got a little something going on over at wagertalk.com, so tell us about it.
Yeah, Joe, it's a good segue. We're going to have 8 games featured in that top 25 video. I'm going to do it right after the show here today. It'll be posted by Thursday evening here on Wager Talk TV. So hit the subscribe button and, more importantly, hit that bell for an instant alert when my college football top 25 video and my NFL Fade the Public videos both go live this week. And there are 4 true head-to-head top 25 matchups. What I've been doing the past few weeks is doing some additional, just a bit outside games. And this one, Wyoming and Air Force, is a textbook example of what I'm talking about. If you look at the additional votes on the AP poll, right now, Wyoming's coming in 27th. Air Force is coming in 28th. Needless to say, whoever wins this game most likely will be a ranked top 25 team next week. By the way, this is at 7 o'clock Eastern Saturday night on CBS Sports Network. And I think that team is going to be Air Force. Not only are they a 10-point favorite, but my 10,000 game simulation, the database has them winning by 15 points on average. That surprised me because when you see a low total like 41, you would think a 10-point spread is going to be tough, especially a run-based team like Air Force against a pretty good defensive dog in Wyoming. Wyoming giving up just over 5 yards per play, returned the second most experienced defensive unit in the country this year out of over 130 FBS teams. But this is not a good setup for Wyoming. Now, first of all, the altitude won't be an edge. Wyoming actually plays on the highest altitude of the country, so going to Air Force isn't going to be an issue. But they're not going to have as much of an advantage as they normally have when they're at home. And this is only their second road trip of the season. Had to play at Texas back in mid-September. So they haven't traveled for an entire month, and now they're taking on a very difficult opponent. The key is going to be, can you stop the run? What Wyoming's done very well this year is stop the pass. They give up 6.1 against teams that average 7.3. They give up 4.1 against 4.4 in the rush. They've been a very mediocre rush defense, and I think that's going to be the difference in this game. Air Force runs for 330 yards a game. And guess what? They have a huge revenge motive as well after losing as over a 2-touchdown favorite on the road at Wyoming last season. It all adds up to a good situational setup, a good matchup, and we get line value. Take a look at Air Force -10. And as you check the Wager Talk live odds screen here on Thursday afternoon, there are some 10.5 starting to pop. So I'd play it sooner than later. Air Force Falcons -10 on Saturday night. And don't forget, my personal best bets are on my page. I've got 5 strong college football best bets for Saturday. Get them nice and early right now. Steve Merrill, wagertalk.com.
Going to be a fun one there with Air Force and Wyoming. We'll see if the hype is real coming up this weekend. And Jeff, you got a game here as well. You're going to break down. It probably going to be the most watched, if not the most entertaining game of the weekend, as Oregon and Washington are going to be doing battle here in the Pac-12. This game's going to go a long way in deciding who the Heisman winner is. You can believe that. So what do you think we're going to get with these two powerhouses here between Oregon and Washington?
Yeah, actually before the season started, I had 3 guys that I was really keeping my eye on for the Heisman, all 3 of which I actually talked about today. For one of them was Joe Milton, and the other 2 were these 2 guys that are looking a little better than Joe Milton, obviously, at this point. But, I want to touch on these offenses quickly because they have been so impressive, but the defense is the difference maker here. I mean, in the Pac-12, you have the top 3 leading receivers in yards per game in the conference. 2 of them come from Washington, 1 of them from Oregon. And these 2 quarterbacks, I mean, Bo Nix leads the nation in completion percentage with 80.4% of qualifying quarterbacks. And Penix is averaging 11.2 yards per attempt, which also leads the nation. So these guys are obviously getting it done through the air. It's almost a Goliath versus Goliath kind of offense here. But I mean, how about the defense, at least of Oregon, has again been the difference maker here? Because you got a lot of explosive offenses in the Pac-12, but it comes down to the defense and who can stop those opposing offenses. And I mentioned it earlier in that big game breakdown in regards to against opposing averages. And this Oregon team far behind A&M. They're 9th in the nation. They're holding opposing offenses to 101 yards below their season average. And that number explodes, holding conference opponents over 200 yards under their season average, which is 3rd in the nation. And I know they've only played 2 conference games so far, but most teams haven't played a whole lot more than that. Both teams are 5-0, but I think the big thing that I'm looking at here is Oregon is also 5-0 against the spread. They've won and covered 15 of the last 18 meetings between these 2 teams, and the road team has won and covered 3 straight games. Oregon's a dog here, but I think they get it done on the road, seeing as Washington 92nd in the nation, allowing almost 250 yards per game through the air. Oregon 5th in the country, 154 yards per game allowed through the air. And it really comes down to that factor right there. We know Nix can pass. We know Penix can rack up the yards. So which defense is really going to stand up? And I think Oregon's pass defense really gets it done here, getting 3 points in this big game. I know I'll be watching. It's also my best bet for this show.
All right, there you go. Should be a whole lot of fun to watch those games, plus some here in this week 7 of the college football season. But we're not done, because we've got plenty of other games to preview here before kickoff begins this Saturday. Just go ahead, click on that video on the screen right now, and you'll have access to all of not only the top 25, but all of the previews and best bets for week 7 in a college football slate. Make plans to join us again for the Friday edition of college football, the Kickoff show. We'll be back again tomorrow. Until then, good luck. We'll see you again soon.